Estate planning is not for everyone. So who is it for?
Estate planning is really like an umbrella term. It's all about people and relationships. Unless you have suffered some loss yourself or have things to lose, no one's going to hire you as an attorney.
My idea of a lawyer was criminal law. When you engage a client, do you talk about all of this stuff as one package?
We talk about everything.
How did you get into this?
I enjoy the relationship building that I have with people. They tell me everything, and I tell them everything as well. The really interesting thing is that if it works well, you're not even going to know that it works well. Estate planning is really people-driven.
Is there anything that an estate plan could help me while I'm still alive? So a will or a trust? Which one should we choose? How expensive is trust? The first objection to everything what you just said is that I'm not rich.
Right.
Is estate planning only for the rich? Nobody likes to talk about death.
The act of dying is a real thing, and then the post-death is very much a real thing too.
Welcome, William, huh?
Thank you so much, Naya, for having me. Yeah.
Estate planning is not for everyone. So who is it for?
It's funny because my website says, the tagline says that estate planning is for everybody. I certainly have a median clientele. Like there's a demographic. I would say that even though I target everybody, people who are 18 and above, my main audience is still people who are between the ages of 50 to 90. I think that's the main demographic I typically serve. And the reason why is because typically when you are of that age bracket, you have either suffered loss yourself or have experienced people who have done the same. In my 20s, when I was a newer lawyer and exploring different avenues to go to in law, I thought about estate planning, but then I quickly realized that unless you have suffered some loss yourself or have things to lose, no one's going to hire you as an attorney because you would have no understanding of what it's like to be a full-grown adult who has either lost a child or lost a parent or lost a spouse, for example.
Very interesting.
It's heavy stuff. Yeah.
Growing up, I had an uncle who passed away, who was a lawyer himself.
Okay.
But my idea of a lawyer was criminal law, right? He was a criminal lawyer and he got assassinated. So wild stuff there. But so when I think of, growing up, I thought of lawyer is like that, criminal law. And then, you as I matured a little bit more, we start knowing about, there's a divorce lawyer, right? So there's lawyer. But estate planning kept hidden from me. And I'm sure it's probably hidden to a lot of people. They don't understand it. What's that word even mean? Unpack it for us.
Right. And I thought the same thing when I was a young lawyer myself. I'm like, is that still practicing law really? And the reality is it is still absolutely practicing law. Estate planning is really like an umbrella term. You might be familiar with what a will is, maybe what a trust is, but let's start with a will. A will is a really basic instrument. It's a legal document. It's typically really short, and all it says is it says who you are, and then what you want to have what you want to have happen to your things when you pass away and die. So that's a very basic instrument. People get that concept. Estate planners, they help people draft wills, but they also kind of strategize as to what to do with your health care when you're incapacitated, what to do with the rest of your assets when you're incapacitated. They also help people devise strategies to ensure that the assets could still be managed under somebody else's control way after the person has died. It is possible and is legally possible to have assets managed by people multiple generations removed from the original settler or the original grantor of the asset. So it's a way to, I think strictly the most boring way to think about estate planning is really just how to manage assets while you're still alive, and also how to manage assets well after you're gone. Since I've started doing the practice though, I've quickly realized that it's really relational driven. It's all about people and relationships. And I like focusing on the dying aspect to it too. I like to spend my time working with people to ensure that their healthcare wishes are conformed to in a medical setting. I like to ensure that conflict, if possible, is minimized as well.
Yeah, but we're going to unpack all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we do that, I was hoping that you would shed light on Imagine a truck driver right now listening to us.
Yes.
The first objection to everything what you just said is that I'm not rich.
Right.
So is this podcast only for the people who are rich? Is estate planning only for the rich?
I think that is really common misconception that estate planning is only for the rich. The reason why it's not only for the rich. So first of all, the fact that you and I are alive and talking and have our limbs, we are rich, right? Health is beyond material, generally speaking. But in the state of California, if you have assets beyond $208,000, and when you die, those assets have to go through a court process called probate to have it transferred out. In that process, it's a long process. It takes, generally about 2 years. Creditors line up to get paid if you owe them money. And then whatever is left over is then given to your heirs if you don't have a will. If you do have a will where you specify beneficiaries, then it's given to those people. So the fact that probate court exists and the fact that probate exists as a process is basically enough reason to get people to do some basic estate planning. So I'd say most trusts drafted in the country today are for the purposes of avoiding probate. Once you pass, it's conceivable to have assets transferred out within weeks and months as opposed to being years, and then to have a big portion of that money being taken away by the attorneys involved in probate, the court filing fees, and other professionals you have to hire in the process of probate to facilitate the transfer of those assets. So I think a lot of people, they do have homes, and most homes in California are many times over $200,000. So I think the fact that you have a house should justify some estate planning. If you happen to have minor children, also another reason why you should do estate planning, because when you pass away and you happen to have minor children, someone else has to step in as a guardian, and some court has to basically rubber stamp or approve of a guardianship proceeding so that some child could be with some adult and to be responsible for them. So that's why I feel like, yes, I think it's really common to think, I'm not old enough or I don't have enough assets to justify or warrant estate planning. But the reality is, I think, there's really no hard and fast rule. It's really more like if you happen to have people who depend on you, and if you happen to have some things to lose, then that should be enough to get you thinking about maybe doing some estate planning.
So first of all, $280,000 of assets is kind of the minimum for people to start thinking of asset planning. And if you're in California, if you have a house, you're already above that threshold by far, given
Absolutely.
the house prices right now. But let's say you don't own a house,
Right.
but you have children.
Right.
Children are the biggest asset. If you pass away, someone has to decide who is going to be the caretaker for those children, and that's another reason.
Exactly. So, do you want your sister to be the guardian? Do you want your mother, who's 70, to be the guardian? Do you get along with your sister's husband, for example? Right. Well, what if you don't philosophically align with what she does, or if you don't, or if she can't take care of herself, how can she take care of your children? So there's a lot going on. I think oftentimes people do think that comes down to numbers, but for a lot of my young clients, young as in people in my age bracket, deciding who should take over the children as parents or as guardians is probably the most difficult discussion. And I think a will, a trust, all these things are literally documents. But you're not really paying for just the documents. You're paying for the guided exploration, the coaching, and the conversations that happens to be memorialized down to the will, down to the trust. So, and it all comes back down to relationships. It all comes back down to the relationship with you and your loved ones, you and the attorneys. There's a lot to it, actually.
Yeah. And I think it's nobody likes to talk about death, right?
No, absolutely not. I think, and that's the number one competitor, actually, for me. I feel like people shy away from it because they don't want to manifest the very thing they're trying to avoid, right? What's really odd is that death is very much a natural process of living. It's absolutely part of it, right? And then like to have that be a thing that people are so they get such a big like roadblock when it comes to death that they try to avoid estate planning completely.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that, unless you suffered some loss or people who have, it's very difficult to bring yourself to talking about death.
Yeah.
I think a lot of estate planners, they focus on legacy or wealth building and they skirt around the whole death issue. But death is very much a real thing. The act of dying is a real thing. And then the post-death is very much a real thing too.
Right.
I think people are fixated about the hospital and they're fixated on like maybe the actual literal act of dying. We're talking about like over the hours or weeks. But then relationships and families, and friendships, they really change after death.
Definitely. And death is so real. In the last BNI meeting that we both part of BNI, one of the business owners there, he has only one employee, and that employee is a healthy 30 something years old, active, no signs of problems.
Right.
And he just died of a heart attack. He has kids. They're doing like GoFundMe campaigns for them, and it's such a sad story, but it's part of life, and you hear it all the time. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of like the life insurance, the estate planning, are all the things that people are trying to avoid, although they're necessary. And it's also an act of generosity, I think.
Yeah, and that's absolutely one way that some attorneys do try to use one tactic they use to convince people that you need this thing, right? That this is an act of love and this is what's going to keep the family together. The really interesting thing is that if it works well, you're not even going to know that it works well. Only if when it doesn't work well at all would you realize, gosh, I wish I did some estate planning. The best case scenario is that the kids, they deal with their parents passing, they find these sets of documents and this full-blown estate plan, and then they just quietly execute it, and it's totally anticlimactic, right? Like that's the best case scenario. I think the situation where the family just fights on end many years later, many thousands spent, like that's a very clear indication of the fact that there's been no understanding of what should have been done, no real earnest planning. Sometimes it's difficult to see families like torn apart because of that.
So we talked about the assets, the actual properties or financial assets.
Right.
We talked also about the decision on what happens with the children after we pass away. What other aspects that are important to involve an estate planning attorney with?
Estate planning is really people driven, right? I think people are really focused on like what the will says, what the trust says. But the reality is that once you do pass away, someone or some people have to do things for a certain amount of time. They have to go through the process of either probate administration or trust administration. I know it sounds really boring, but basically these are the people who have to follow your sets of instructions to the T. So for example, if you say upon my death, I want all my assets to be split 3 ways among my 3 children, then a trustee who you've appointed, who you've nominated would do just that, right? Trustee is typically maybe a surviving spouse or a confidant or somebody professional you really trust. But the whole goal is that they're supposed to come in and basically sell off things that, to pay people off the way that you wanted it to. Sometimes certain trusts could have certain rules where they're like, I want to keep this money in it for 18 years until so-and-so is an adult and they need money at a later time, for example, right? So I think like when it comes to doing that, it's all about, picking the people that you do trust who can in fact execute at a certain level over the years. So that's a big part of estate planning too, like finding the right people.
Is there anything that an estate plan could help me while I'm still alive?
Absolutely. While you're still alive, but not yet dead, when you've suffered some sort of incapacity, let's say, for example, you're in a really horrible car accident, you're either paralyzed or you really can't walk, you really can't talk. Somebody has to manage your stuff. Somebody's got to sell your business, wind it down. Somebody's got to keep running your business if that's the goal. So there's that period where, and this is a period that people don't really think about. They're only thinking about binary, being alive and dying, right? But for some people, they stay alive for a very long time. But then their physical well being is obviously diminished. So in that state of incapacity, there needs to be some sort of planning done. So to answer your question, yes, I mean, nomination of a potential conservator or having assets put into a trust where a trustee could take things over, or succession planning for your business where some trusted partner could take things over, keep things running. Absolutely, that could keep things kind of running for your livelihood, basically.
And for wealthy people, I came across a nonprofit or some sort of NGO that was founded upon the death of a wealthy person. And it's been there for like 50 years. And it's been doing so much good to the world because that person is purpose driven. They wanted to see something happen in the world according to their, like, what do they think that it's right? So their trust compromises of a big chunk of their assets to be going to that purpose. And now they have a legacy after 50 years that their name is still there.
Right.
So can you talk more about this stuff?
Absolutely. And this is the whole idea of having so much money that you're able to either start up a foundation or put things in a trust where things keep running so long as there's still money. So a trust, especially when you first create a trust, it's not technically an entity. It's still revocable, which means that it's still you for the most part. It's not until you die would it then lose something called a grantor status, so it gets its own EIN. So now you're closer to an entity. It has its own checking account. It has key people who you've nominated to become trustee. So if you happen to have, all your assets in a trust, and you happen to have, let's say $1 billion, for example, then of course you're going to have, a statement of intent, what the trust purpose is. So these organizations, these families, like the Getty, for example, they have a ton of art, and they're the patrons of the arts, and they keep things running in a family like forever. I mean, under the trust name at least, and many trusts can last many generations, but it can't last forever. There is something called this is like really technical. There's something called the rules against perpetuities. Almost all lawyers know about this rule, but the whole idea is that nothing could be restrained on property indefinitely. There has to be like an end to it. But yeah, many of these trusts, so long as there's enough money and so long as there's a valid point to it, they could last many generations.
You said there's a limit. Is it like 100 years?
So the technical rule, it's a really archaic rule, but basically it's measured by something called a life in being. So the last lineal descendant that was around when the trust was made can't be beyond 21 years, I believe 21 years after their death. So I'd say on average that might be between 100 years, 150 years or something like that. It's just a way to kind of measure life or to measure some sort of finality.
Right.
There's no like really hard fast rules. Some states I think have modified that via statute, but that's typically the case. But most people don't have enough money to last that long. We're talking about a situation that applies to a very small amount of people.
But hold on, even if they don't have money, like let's say I decided to put my assets for a foundation.
Yes.
And that foundation is run, so it's doing fundraising and it's becoming self-sufficient, so to speak.
Well, the taxation on a foundation or a trust typically it's not nothing. It's actually, so for an irrevocable trust, for example, the taxation is actually really, really high. So if it's generating income and you're literally paying the people to run the trust as well, unless it's highly profitable, the money is easily spent quite down. So, which is why typically we're talking many millions or billions in a certain trust or a foundation that's still running today. So there are quite a bit of things that make it so that it's difficult to have money last so many generations. And of course, people generations removed, they don't spend the same way as
Yeah.
the founder did. So, but then again, like this is a world that I'm not so familiar with either. It's just
Right.
stuff that this is not my clientele at all. So
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
stuff that
No,
I sort of understand.
I was just
yeah.
curious.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like-
no.
So if people care about legacy, that's a way. If people care about what happened to their children after they pass, this is a way.
Right.
What happens if, for example, God forbid, somebody got in an accident, they're in a coma,
Yeah.
somebody has to make a decision whether they cut a limb or not, whether to use experimental treatment
Right.
on them or not, whether
Right.
to use. So who makes those decisions?
Right. So in California, it's typically next of kin. So if you're a married person, the doctors will look to the spouse or the kids who are nearby. For people who don't want those default rules, so there are default rules. It's like basically the spouse, and if there's no spouse, it's kids, right? If a person doesn't like that default rule or that default hierarchy, they could fill out what's called a California Advanced Healthcare Directive, and that allows them to override the point person that the doctors would see. Maybe you want to nominate your sister who happens to be a nurse or a doctor, right? Because she's not as involved, she's emotionally keel, and like she is able to make these medical sound decisions. In that advanced healthcare directive, you could also decide whether or not you want to do something called full code, which simply means to do everything possible to keep you alive, or not to do that, to potentially not keep you alive if you happen to have a condition that's really dire and your death is probably imminent, or if the treatment, if the detriment of the treatment outweighs the pros, for example. You get to also further specify the types of medications you want, and you get to be really creative. I've had people say that they want a support animal nearby if possible, certain music playing if possible, certain things on TV playing if possible. And the really interesting thing is that this document, the directive, it's actually used the most. I mean, somebody is going to be hospitalized at some point. Like it really is a document that's used. I think for a lot of people currently admitted to the hospital, that's one of the first things that they might have you fill out if you don't have one. It's like, hey, who's your point person? You're about to go into surgery. Who do you want making these decisions if something were to happen and if you can't speak for yourself, right? And yeah, I mean, like, I think if you have these discussions with people, with your friends and family about what the healthcare philosophy is, it would make the decision making so much easier. So my wife, she's a doctor, and she sees this all the time. This document that we're talking about, she sees it almost every single day she's working. It's almost like somebody ordering, like, I don't know, a hamburger or something like that, right, at a diner. The discussions with family is really, really difficult if they are in denial of death, or if they're trying to prove their love for their parent. It's like, I love my parent, I want to keep them alive, right? Regardless. So I think, like, if you don't have these discussions and there's conflict between the children, that's when it's really difficult. So I think a way to make the death as easy as possible, or a way to make the healthcare as easy as possible, I think filling that form out, having these discussions is like the best way to go about it.
And how does it work? Let's say someone got involved in an accident, went to the hospital, they're in a coma.
Yeah.
How do we know if they even have a health directive or not?
Yeah. Some clients have put copies of it in their car, for example. The state of California actually has a repository through the Secretary of State that allows you to submit your advanced healthcare directive, but oddly enough, no one knows about it. I asked my wife about it. She says, I don't know about that. think the most common way that people give a copy to people is to upload it to their client healthcare portal, the hospital or to the clinic. So when you go see the doctor next, you're like, hey, here's my directive. Can you scan it and put it in the system? And oftentimes people just happen to have it. It's been emailed to a friend, or it's just a document that's laying around with their important documents at the house.
So tell me, when you engage a client, do you talk about all of this stuff as one package, or they have to pick and choose? Oh, let's deal only with the assets, and let's deal with other things differently.
We talk about everything. It totally is a full package. Like the whole idea is that I get to a design meeting with them. Basically, it's a second follow-up meeting with them where I drill down what they want, like down to the nitty-gritty, right? Like the who, what, and how much. And then we talk about healthcare as well. So there's a lot. And oftentimes people may have had some time to digest what they wanted. But sometimes when my clients are like, you know what, I gotta get back to you. Or can I change my mind in a week? Let's put a placeholder here now. I think sometimes I tell them, you know what, like the fact that we're doing this trust now, for example, or the fact that we're doing this will right now, it doesn't mean that it's fixed forever. You could always change it as long as you're still alive and well. So I tell them if the decision is not perfect, but it's good enough, then I think we should totally do it. But yeah, I think for a lot of my clients, it is overwhelming. We do bombard them with a lot of questions that they may have not even thought about. They don't have the answer for. So, like I said, it all comes back down to the relationships, and also to the conversations that they have with others. That's really all it is.
So a will or a trust? Which one should we choose?
I would say most attorneys would say that a trust is more versatile, just because it does so much. It's able to manage the money for people. So in the case of minors, when someone is like 12 or something like that, the court, you can't hold the asset for the child. You know, as soon as they're 18, they get it 100%. So if you don't want a child to get all their money at 18, you have to ensure that there's some other controls, some mechanism for control to ensure that the money is managed for them properly until they reach a certain age. Trusts are typically more complicated. Some people might think it's overkill. So I think if you happen to not have a house at all, then maybe a trust is unnecessary. So wills typically have a mechanism for you to nominate your guardians. So I think if you happen to be below the $200,000 threshold we talked about, and you don't happen to have a house and you have minor kids, a will may be sufficient. But if you do happen to have assets or a house, for example, a trust may make some more sense. But oftentimes it is kind of like analysis. It's more of a confluence. You have to talk about, you got to see what their goals are, really. I mean, if they want to be really sophisticated with what they're doing and they absolutely do want to avoid probate, then obviously a trust might be the better option for them.
How expensive is trust?
I'd say most attorneys in California, they charge somewhere between, for a basic trust, maybe between $2,000 to $6,000. Obviously, $6,000 on the higher range. It's also very geographic dependent as well. I think on the west side of LA, I think that's when you're looking at the higher prices. Outside of bigger cities, I would imagine that they're less expensive. But then again, like there's also no amazing pattern for like, you know, what you're paying and what you're getting as well. Because I've seen attorneys draft trusts that are they're well written and they do well, and they're cheap. I've seen attorneys that charge a ton and they're like not the best either. So it really depends on like the relationship you have with the attorney, whether or not they'd be willing to keep working with you to ensure that your estate plan conforms to what you truly want.
So this money, that $2,000 to $6,000, does it go to the attorney purely, or kind of like you're starting an entity with the Secretary of State? Like, is it like a company, like an LLC?
No, it's not. It's not a company. I think that's also an interesting misconception too, because like I'm on Instagram. I follow these influencer online, right? And then there's this guy who's teaching people how to do wholesaling real estate. And he talks about trusts, and they talk about putting the asset in the trust and selling the trust. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not really possible, I don't think. So I'm really curious, like maybe I should pay for his course so I could understand what he's doing because this doesn't make sense.
Or maybe you just BSing, right?
Right. Yeah. So a trust is a personal private document. I mean, I could probably write one in a single half sheet right now, which would be valid. Will I trust it with all the money? Probably not. Maybe not. Well, maybe myself, but not with somebody else. It's not filed with the Secretary of State. It's not recorded in the county. It's a private document. The only time it might come out to public is if there's a dispute and it ends up being in court. The original and likely the copy of the trust are valid. And that's why I say this comes back down to my initial saying about how like a trust simply is simply a memorialization of the understanding and agreement as to what should happen to my assets, right? So let's do a clear example here. I have a house in LA County, and I want to ensure that upon the death of myself and my wife, I wanted to go to my two boys, right? So, Naya, you seem like a really good, trustworthy guy. Like, I think you run a really good business here. And I think that you would do a great job as trustee to ensure that you effectuate my intent that upon my wife and my passing, I want you to sell the house and you give them the proceeds. And do you understand what I want?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So let's write this thing down, and when it happens, you get to take that trust to, say the title company or the real estate agent. Like, yeah, there's this trust. This is the agreement, and this is what I'm doing for him. He passed away. I'm doing this for him right now.
So I get a copy as a trustee?
Sure, you can get a copy. Yeah. Oftentimes people don't give copies because they do such a bad job at like ensuring that people have the paperwork necessary. But yeah, like, so for example, I tell all my clients, hey, if you do nominate somebody as trustee, make sure that that trustee knows you've done that and that they have access to your stuff, your email or something, some PDF file, right? Otherwise, like there might be a long dispute in probate court to determine what was a trust, if there's a trust at all.
So where this documents lives, like, is it with the estate planning attorney or who keeps that private document?
Old school, an attorney might have it in their safe and they keep all that stuff for the people. But now with the digital world, now with the fact that a copy is as good as the original, the client typically keeps that. The attorney, as a courtesy, might do a digital copy. The only document that has to be the original is the will. So if you pass away and you have to probate the will, the court needs you to send them the literal original will. If it's just a copy, you have to prove that the copy is a copy of the original. And some attorneys still do that. They might keep the original for them, but typically, I would say most clients keep it themselves. Like in today's age.
How did you get into this?
When I first became a lawyer, I thought I wanted to do something like important and serious. I landed at a litigation firm in Orange County, and did it for about 2 years. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the firm culture. I didn't like what I like the intellectual. I love the reading and writing. I like that exercise of it, but I didn't enjoy the actual firm culture. I didn't enjoy like the actual day-to-day of being a lawyer, right? For a while, I thought that I made a mistake because it wasn't very creative. Instead of like exploring other firms or exploring different sides in the law, I decided that I was just going to leave the profession entirely and just try to do something more creative. I think I wanted to do like advertising or marketing, right? So I ended up landing a job on the west side of LA, doing at an ad tech agency. They were focused on doing a lot of like websites and stuff for certain brands. And when I was there, I saw a lot of people getting into coding software. I'm like, whoa, these people are making great money and they're coding. So I pivoted. I think I was in my late 20s by then. Maybe I was like probably 30, but I decided, you know what? Maybe I could learn how to code and I'll do that. So I learned how to code for the iPhone. Um, and I worked at a software consulting agency for about, 7, 8 years. I thought I was done with law for good at that point. Like I was even thinking about going inactive. So I think that there's like statuses in the state bar. Instead of paying that yearly fee and staying up to date, you could just go inactive and just not doing any of that stuff. I was going to do that, but I decided that there were certain pieces of law I did miss. Like I did try dabbling in certain things, take on cases at like moonlighting, doing that. I even did like a criminal appeal, which I won like right when I first started doing the ad agency work. But I it wasn't until 2019, 2018 that you know I thought, you know what, I think like I had a good run with like doing software engineering. I kind of miss the relationship and working with clients. So I think that's when I started looking into um, doing that somehow in some capacity. So I started my own law practice. And at the time, my wife had moved. My girlfriend, my now wife, had got a job opportunity out in New Mexico, in rural New Mexico, to practice small town hospitalist medicine. So I'm like, you know what? Like that seems like a cool venture. Like I want to go out there too. And we would just kind of ping pong between New Mexico and also back in Long Beach when we lived in Long Beach. And I had decided to take the bar exam out there to basically open up my own small law practice. Right, the town only had about 8 to 10,000 people. The county had maybe 25,000 people, and there were only maybe 3 or 4 lawyers in town who were private practice attorneys. So I kind of did everything. I did family law, I did criminal law, I did bankruptcy, civil litigation. I was contract counsel for an Indian reservation to do their public defense. So I basically like got to experience law practice from like a really different perspective. I think if anything, it felt like what law practice may have been probably closer to like 70 years ago, 100 years ago, where a lawyer did so many different things. One of the areas was also estate planning. I think I've always had an interest in estate planning because it's all about building things and protecting things as opposed to like litigating over certain assets, right? So when my first son was born, um, and maybe 6 months after he was born, we realized that he had a medical condition. Um, and that basically forced us to think about where we should live next. So our town only had that one hospital that my wife worked at. Each time my son had a medical emergency, we had to basically call the ambulance, and we'd have to drive down to the airport, and somebody from Albuquerque would have to come in a helicopter to take us to the hospital in Albuquerque because only such a hospital will be able to take care of um, such a thing. So he's got epilepsy, it's seizures. So we're like, we need to see the neurologists. We need more specialists, and that made us make the decision to basically move back to LA County to California. In that first year, like I, I think we were still trying to understand what this all meant to us. So I was still practicing, but at a very very small scale. It wasn't until about a year and a half after we moved back that I thought, you know what, I do want to do estate planning again. It's flexible, obviously, because we have young children and we have to take care of them, and there's no court involved, so like I could always kind of plan my days really well. And because he has seizures, these things like are obviously unpredictable. They require medical intervention. Um, and I enjoyed it. I mean, I so on one hand, it was about being a business owner. I needed some ability to ensure that I could have flexibility with my schedule, and also secondly, I think I needed to ensure that I didn't work for anyone else. So that's how I kind of got back into estate planning, and I scaled it down because I realized that I needed that pure flexibility. So I did nothing else. I decided to focus exclusively on estate planning. And I feel like it's a little bit of a full circle because, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, of this interview, it's like unless you've got something to lose or suffered loss yourself, you really can't be a good estate planner because you don't have this understanding, right? I think like so like home ownership is a very clear example. Like I could learn and read about what a deed is, but until you take title of a property, if this house, for example, like you won't be able to understand what it means to own a house. Like I think, or what it means to like appoint a guardian for a kid who happens to have special needs, for example. So I think like because I've gone through this stuff within the past 5 years or so, it felt right and it made a ton of sense. So I think I enjoy the relationship building that I have with people. I'm like, it feels like as if I'm like the family attorney, like they know me, I know their kids. And then like for that brief 1-2 hour interview I have with them, it's like, oh yeah, they tell me everything and I tell them everything as well.
Yeah.
It's like people could be very secretive with their family members, but then when you meet with an estate planner, you're very honest because it's necessary to be honest at that point. So it's
Yeah, and
interesting.
I have to say you're very easy to talk to, and you project trust and confidence. I feel like this is the personality traits that are specific to people, and some people have it, some people don't. And I think you are spot on there.
Yeah.
It fits your personality.
So it fits my personality. Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of personality too, is like that's the other thing about estate planners. Like we're all not the same. I think if anything, you're paying for a specific personality to work with you. Like I think some people like attorneys who are way more flashy, right? Or they're way more, or they want someone really, really like matter of fact, or they want someone who, I think of them as avatars, basically. It's like a certain profile that you want to work with. So I think like it doesn't come down to cost. I think a lot of clients call people like, they're like, hey, how much do you charge? I'm like, yeah, I charge this much, but it really comes down to like whether or not you work well with this person, because some attorneys are amazing, but then they just, for some reason, they don't satisfy your need for whatever reason,
What one book or person influenced you the most?
So when I was listening to the other interviews you've done, and I recognized this question, and I had to think, it's like, so I often read a lot of long form article. I don't read, I guess I do read some books too, but I feel like a lot of it just ends up being like kind of mushed together. So in my 20s, I do remember reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I read it twice in my life. I think I read it in my 20s, I read it in my 30s. And like each reading, I do get more from it. I think, so that's obviously a fiction book. Another book
What is it about though?
Oh, it's about a guy who, so this is, so it's funny because this is not a business book whatsoever.
I mean, it influenced you. So what I'm curious about is what did it influence you?
So I think it's not so much that it influenced me, but it more like it made a deep impression in me. I think, so the premise of the book, the protagonist is that he is desperate, or maybe he's bored, but he ends up killing a woman. And the entire rest of the book is just a cat and mouse game between the detective and him. And there's just inner dialogue as to like, what have I done? Like, what's the meaning of this? So then you end up questioning, like, I think you end up questioning, like, hey, like, you're basically going along for the ride in his inner dialogue about what he's done and what it all means, right? Another book that I would say made a deep impression on me was John Steinbeck's East of Eden. And the themes of that book really are about, it's about the relationships too between people and family and stuff. So it's funny because I feel like I can't say that I've taken away something. Like it's not like a business book, but for some reason, like those two books really stood out to me, and that they've left an impression on me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, books have this ability to sneak into your brain, and they will live there in silence. And then one time you'll be confronted with a decision to make. And then you make that decision with confidence and you wonder like, how did I make that decision? And it's that accumulation of all this data stored in the back of your brain,
Right.
like with all the books. I remember when I was in that reading spree where I was reading a lot.
Yeah.
I had some time on me, and I was in that habit of like knocking out books. And then I felt like I'm a superhuman. Like
Right.
everything, I don't recall where this is coming from, but I know it. I've seen it somewhere. And that kind of the ability of what reading books give people.
Yeah. You're like programming yourself slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like data in ChatGPT.
Right.
ChatGPT is as good as the data it's been fed.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. What about people? Is there any specific people who believed in you early on, or people who are really inspired you, pushed you, made you a better person?
Yeah, I mean, like there are certain like mentors and bosses. I remember like when I first worked at an ad agency, the one boss, I basically was presented myself like, hey, like yeah, I'm a lawyer. Yeah, I wanted to quit law, but the guy basically took a chance with me, right? He's like, hey, like you seem like you are hungry enough, driven enough to want to make this change and shift. At that time, I think like tech was undergoing a lot of change too. I think like people were switching from desktop web to mobile web or native applications like the Android and iPhone. So I think there was like a ton of opportunity. I think he saw that I wanted to learn. So I think like, going through that process, being taken under the wing and really just like being able to grow in that way made a huge difference for my career trajectory and like understanding of how things really work. I mean, I think like for a lot of young people, our generation, we were taught that the path is very straight and narrow. You like go to college, you get that job, and you kind of climb up that corporate ladder. You buy the house or whatever, and that's basically it. But I think like also within our generation, we quickly realized that hey, there are these other opportunities that did not exist before, even just 5-10 years ago, right? So AI is very clearly one of them. I think we would have killed to have such a technology just 10 years ago. Now people are taking it for granted to make memes with it, right? So I think like if it wasn't for that ability to kind of take that off ramp and to be introduced in a completely different way of thinking or career projection trajectory, like I think it would have taken me a long time to realize like, hey, like I could exit out of this.
Steve Jobs dropped out of college, but he kept recalling that calligraphy class that he took that helped him shape the Macintosh back in the day. I don't know if you recall that story, but anyway, what things or skills that you acquired in your ad career, in your advertising career, in your coding, mobile apps and stuff that you find relevant to practicing estate planning law?
I think, especially with coding, I think you have to always anticipate a worst case scenario. You basically have to anticipate a catastrophic failure, right? Like that there might be bugs that really cause loss of a lot of money or people's time or a crash of an application. Those are very real things. So you're always testing to ensure that it is robust, what you've done, and that it could sustain that abuse, basically. With estate planning and trusts, I do try to think that far ahead. I do try to ensure that the conflict is dampened as much as possible. But then again, like the stress test for an estate plan doesn't come until 30, 40 years later when a person passes away. So
Yeah.
but you get to play out the scenarios, but people are complicated, so you really don't know who the players are often, which is kind of why it's really important that if you do it yourself, you have to be sure you know what you're doing, because if you don't know what you're doing, like the work product you've worked on, it may not pass the stress test when it is time to use the estate plan.
That's wonderful, the analogy between coding and estate planning. And as soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, they're very similar, because I remember taking Python classes too. And, bugs keep happening and you have to troubleshoot, and then finally the system works without no bugs, and it's great because you have foreseen all what could happen, and you basically planned for it. And the same with estate planning, you have to have a future looking outlook.
Right. And the other thing is, the reality is that you can plan all day, but like sometimes all your plans, they go out the window completely. Like I said, people are complicated.
Yeah.
And people are willing to fight tooth and nail and spend thousands of dollars, over $500 sometimes. Like, you just cannot control or plan human emotion. And that's why I feel like you need to have good relationships, and that you have to ensure that you maintain these relationships. Otherwise, like, it doesn't matter what your estate plan says. I think some of my clients, so we're talking about wealth and being rich. I think I've met quite a few successful clients, and when it comes down to asking them, hey, who are you close to? Who do you trust? Who would you like to appoint as trustees? And I've had successful clients who have no one that they trust. They don't have friends to count on. Like, is it a facade that is their life a facade? Like, is it a byproduct of them being successful that they don't have these people to be vulnerable with? I don't know. But I think like the wealthiest people do have people to look after their interests. I mean, the wealthiest people happen to have people who support them. So I think like it's really easy to try to like say that wealth is all about numbers in a bank account, but really I think like it's about social influence. Still, it all comes back down to it, right? And this is the same thing as this is very much like in BNI, the practice that we do, trading business with each other. You could do all the craziest Instagram ad you want, you could pay all the craziest Google ads you want, but ultimately it comes back down to relationships. And with the BNI philosophy, it's about givers gain, right? So the fact that people are willing to do things on your behalf, and they're willing to ensure that you prosper as well. That's all that it means, really. It means so much in life to have those types of relationships with people.
You see, these last 2 or 3 minutes is what I do this for, podcasting, because you do a lot of content that is scripted, but those last 2 or 3 minutes, what you just said, it's like a mic drop moment. These are things that came from your heart, from things that you would, if you sit down to write a script about what you just said, you would never be able to come up with that. But in a normal conversation with few prompting, you got to say like the core of the issue, right? And you can say it so nicely and so perfectly. And that's why I do podcasting. That's why I love this platform, and I love having these conversations, because it takes out. It's for some reason when we do scripting and we look, when we plan what we want to say about our business, it's so different from being just in an authentic conversation. And I just want to point out that this is, this last, maybe the editors would have to really clip this, because this was really good and it touched me. And you're so right. You dropped some really, really important thing there.
Yeah. And like going back to the whole like dynasty trust example that we had, where we're talking about how like a trust could last many generations, and we're talking to billions of dollars. I mean, there are billions of dollars, but the reality is that there are people who found that the family was so important that they'll still do things in their name, and you see it in other things too that are not related to estate planning or trust. I mean, like you think about some influential people throughout the course of our history or in the country, like they still do things in people's name. It's still important to them. So, and it all comes back down still to social influence.
Yeah. No, but you said something about like the true rich are people who have others who they support them, who they can trust, and that's the true blessing in life, and that's the true richness. It's not really how much you have in a bank account. So what's next for you? What's the coming 5-10 years look like for you and your family?
I think I want to keep growing the business. I think that's really important to me. I think when I first got into the business, I wanted to just focus on being efficient and just basically do estate planning only, and basically to run a really modernized estate planning practice where I just focus on one thing. But I quickly realized that in an estate planning practice, you have clients who get older, they die, they need help with the trust administration. There are people who need conservatorship. So I feel like at this point, I'm basically doing a lot. I'm kind of fleshing out the practice at this point. I've added probate administration. I'm doing trust administration. I'm still doing estate planning. So I think I'm doing a lot of that. It's just to meet more people, serve more people. Otherwise, I'm still really family focused here. My oldest is now 4 years old. He's in TK. He loves it. He's doing well in school. There are some treatments that are coming out, currently being tested right now. So it's like there's one that we like. It's in phase 3. So hopefully that works well and he gets it. Our youngest is starting preschool, which gives me more time to practice. Are you familiar with the Magic Castle, by the way?
Magic Castle?
Magic Castle.
No.
Okay. So one day I'll have you come out or something like that. But basically, it's a club for magicians. So I'm not a magician, but one of my medium-term goals is to become a magician member of that club. Basically, it's a club in Hollywood, and it's where magicians perform. There's also like bar and restaurant, but it's like it's a historic place. It's really cool. It's an institution basically.
So are you gonna pull up my phone from your pocket already? Where's my phone?
No, I think like okay. So I meet these estate planners, or I also meet these real estate agents, and they have these side hobbies that they have. One, I saw a really popular thing that I see people do is comedy. Right? They're like a comedian. So I've met an estate planner who's a comedian. I've met a real estate agent who's a comedian, and same with magicians. I'm like, why are they doing these things? Like, what's drawing to what is it that appeals to them about this type of stuff? And I think it took me a little while to think about it, but I'm like, you know what? Like in our profession, it's all about performance. I'm not saying it's about deception either, but maybe it is. But it's there's something about putting on a show and being cool, and there's something also really lethal about practicing something so very many times that it's second nature to you, till we were able to make magic, basically.
Yeah,
right?
and it's two of my clients have passion projects that we are working together on.
Nice.
A property manager we're writing now a book together on mediumship, healing, talking to animals, stuff like that, like some really deep consciousness stuff. Another client we're doing women empowerment and stuff outside of what she does. So it's very cool, and I think it helps. Again, there's a lot of estate planning attorneys. There's a lot of X and Y, whatever your profession is.
Right.
What differentiates us is these other quirks that we have, like these
It's the person behind.
Because when people connect, like if somebody is interested in magic and they start seeing your content or just knowing that you're practicing that, they have an instant connection with you. So that would also be good for business. Like when they would need an estate planning, they're gonna reach out to you.
Yeah, it's and that's one of the things that a lot of people do use that connection for exactly just that, business development. Yeah. The other thing I would love to do is to write. So I think I've been trying to write on and off, and like it never went anywhere. But I would love to like either do a bit like a quasi nonfiction book related to estate planning, kind of, or just do like a full blown fiction novel. But
oh my God.
Yeah, it's a time thing.
I would love to talk more about this because what we're doing, I think I found a formula for writing books that is amazing and super easy to do. So we come up with an outline, and we divide it into chapters, and each chapter is a podcast.
Oh.
And then we take that podcast, we convert it into a chapter of the book. So instead of you sitting down and typing, and I
Yeah.
just hired an editor, a book editor. He's done many books before. So what we were doing is that we take that plan, we sit on the podcast, we talk extensively about that particular chapter, and then we take that transcript, we give it to the editor, and the editor will put it together in a book format.
Nice.
And that will make book
That's very
writing
helpful, yeah.
super easy.
Yeah, I would say that writing has changed quite a bit. I mean, in the past couple of years, I with ChatGPT, I mean, obviously, like when you're writing like emails, business emails, like it's like sometimes I'm like, hey, can you like proof this thing? And it gives me like a really polished version of what I was writing. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I write so poorly. This computer is doing so well, But I do remember a day back in the day where I would literally sit down, spend hours writing things like work stuff and just for fun stuff, and it's no longer the same anymore. I'm not saying that could just replace us completely.
Sure.
But it is quite amazing how people are able to leverage other tools and skill sets to be able to produce written work.
Yeah. The beauty about this is that when we extract that transcript from the podcast, I ask ChatGPT to preserve the words of the person. That way that the book is very much aligned with everything you said on the show.
Yeah.
It's not like ChatGPT is going rogue and completely writing the whole thing itself.
Right.
It's more like, okay, we are converting that person's intellect into a book, whatever he said in the spoken word into a written word. That's all what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we're using it as a tool and not letting it think for us, so to speak.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for your time. This has been a pleasure, Will.
My pleasure.
Will or William?
I go by Will.
All right. It's been a pleasure, Will. And I look forward for what you're going to do with the magic stuff in the future.
I was kind of being like joking about that, but yeah, absolutely. Now you have me
Committed.
You have me committed. Exactly. Yes.
All right. Fantastic, my friend.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.